Hello and welcome. My guest today is Kristen Roberts, the founder and managing attorney of Trestle Law, a boutique firm helping high growth brands protect and monetize their intellectual property. With nearly 20 years of experience, Kristen has built a multi seven figure firm by treating legal strategy not as a line item expense, but as a tangible revenue driver for health, wellness, and supplement brands. Today, we are driving into the new level, new devil reality of scaling a law firm, why Kristen refuses to pay big law rates, and specific gas framework she uses to ensure her intake team actually closes leads. We will also get into why she thinks most big firm IP portfolios are being left on the table and how you can reclaim that value. Kristen, welcome to the Growth Switch.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. One of the things we spoke with you just before we started recording is that concept of ship of Theseus, that as you're building your practice from the ground, you constantly reinvent some pieces and you change them. What are the things that stay true to the DNA of how you build your practice from the very beginning and is not going to change?
I definitely think the idea of having a great team around you never changes. So, having good people that actually care, I think, is one of the most important things about providing good legal services because, this isn't a cookie cutter, filing one off type of service. This is bespoke white glove legal services. And if you want people to pay the rates that lawyers charge, you need to get people who actually care. So, that is sort of the baseline requirement. If you're going to work with me, you have to actually care, or as I like to say, and I don't know if we could swear, but I say, give a shit. You have to actually give a shit, right? So I think that's really important. And that never changes, even though every time we reach a new level in the firm, we always have to change something because something inevitably breaks.
Sure. Could you give maybe some example of the things that you did change over the years and you replaced, and maybe some new beliefs or new ideas that you incorporated?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the biggest things that I thought when I was growing my practice was that I didn't want to have full-time employees. I was like, it's too much. I'm just going to, have some contract people. I'm going to have some people helping me, but it's just going to be me. But you realize that if you want to grow to 7, 8, 9 figures, you can't do it on your own. There's really only two ways to make more money as an attorney, and that's work longer hours or charge higher rates. There really isn't any other way. There's only a finite amount of time during the day. So I really pushed, and I have business coaches. Shout out to How to Manage. I really was pushed hard to, hire full time staff, and I'm going, no, I can do it without. I can do it without. And then I finally realized I just kept getting capped out, right? I was only able to make a certain amount of money in the firm and service a certain amount. It's not about the money, it's about who you can help, right? I can only help a finite number of people. And yes, that translates into dollars, but I'm stuck. If I want maximum impact in the legal industry, I need to be able to help as many people as I possibly can. And I can't do that as one person. So that was the big change mindset shift that I had to make as a business owner was yes, increasing or adding full-time staff does increase risk to some degree, but when you find the right people and they are all on board with the mission, vision, and values of what it is that you're trying to do, that is what gets you to that next level and beyond.
I think when it comes to being a lawyer, we as a group of people tend to be quite risk averse. And sounds like the people that advised you and you worked on that as well, you had to work through that to take some risks to hire new people, to expand your team to achieve that. But did you perhaps have an example when you were growing almost too fast that things started to break and you were worried about it?
Yeah, I definitely experienced that. I would say around 2023 in my business, where we started getting a bunch of new work coming in, and I was concerned that we weren't going to have enough people power to service the work that was coming in. And so my thought was, let me just get another senior attorney in as fast as I can. And that turned out to be a very big mistake on my part because that person that I ended up hiring, I paid top dollar salary for the level of experience. And, I spent time interviewing them. I did a whole 5-part interview process that I thought was going to work really well. And then the person started, and that person clearly inflated what they were capable of doing. And it ended up really eating into a lot of the profit. So that was like our 1 year. We were, I don't want to say unprofitable, but our profit margin was significantly lower because of that. And it was scary for me because my coaches, my business mentors, they always tell me start looking before you're in that position, right? It takes 6 months to a year to find a really good high level person. And I'm like, well, I need them tomorrow. What do you mean? Right. And so it's scary because as a business owner, you're constantly thinking, I don't want to hire for this role right now because I don't have enough work. But by the time you have enough work, it's too late.
Absolutely. As a business owners, we have to manage that, and it's not something that's being taught in the law school. What were some maybe other examples of your consideration between working in a big law firm and the way how you build your practice, where you take more of entrepreneurial initiatives, and how did that reflect in service as well?
Was really fortunate. I actually never worked for a big law firm. I always worked in smaller law firms. And I think that sort of instilled some of that entrepreneurial spirit in me because at my last law firm before I started my law firm, they made us do everything. I had to manage the trust accounts. I had to make sure that I wasn't going over or, above. We never worked unless we had money in trust. And that's not really the same as a big firm works. Big firms don't always worry or concern themselves as much with AR. So they'll have these big AR accounts outstanding, but they're making hundreds of millions of dollars. So, as long as it's not too much, it's not affecting them too badly. Whereas a small firm, we really have to keep an eye on our AR. And so that was one big sort of sticking point that I took with me from that law firm into this firm is we don't work unless we get paid, right? We don't, unless there's money in trust, we cannot proceed forward with what you need us to do. And that translates differently into the different kinds of clients that we handle. We've had to kind of adjust that as our client base has shifted. So once we get some of the bigger multi-million, billion-dollar clients, they're like, wait a second, we want to be on a 30-day net too. And we've had to find ways to work that out. So one way that I've gotten a little bit more flexible there is we start with a retainer. And then once they show that they have established proof of payment, then we can switch to a more favorable model to them. And that's develops trust because this is a trust-based business as well. And it also helps kind of develop the relationship to make sure we're the right fit. And that's sort of how I've been able to modify myself and be a little bit more flexible. But for the most part, those types of policies, procedures, you have to look at your firm like it is a big firm to some degree or a bigger firm than you have. So even if you're just one person, have the policy for this is how I do things. I wish that I had written more down as to like how I do certain things, because then when you bring on that first employee and they start helping you with it, if you don't have those things, you're going to wonder why that person didn't work out. You're going to wonder why you had to fire that person because they're saying, oh, well, Kristen didn't know what she wanted. Kristen didn't tell me how to do anything. I received no training. I was just told, do this. And then I did it. And they were like, that's wrong. Right. And that's because oftentimes lawyers know how we like things done, but we don't always document how those things should be done in a replicable way. It's oftentimes done on feel. And that is not fun for somebody to learn how to do.
Absolutely. I think it's a very good point, and it's universal across service industry. That as an expert, when we've been through the journey ourselves, we know what good looks like to us, and it comes intuitively. But if we don't document it, it's really hard when we're hiring somebody to succeed at that role. Having gone through that experience now, what would you say maybe are some of the milestones and different level of a company growth where if you are to start over or as a recommendation to somebody, owner of a law firm should stop, document everything before going further so that they don't have that as a management debt in their company?
I think one of the big things, just overarching rule, I think most business owners don't take, and you said something really important, which is lawyers are very risk averse, which I think makes us really bad as entrepreneurs, unfortunately, right? Because a lot of entrepreneurship is being willing to take risks and let things break to some degree, right? And then you learn from what breaks and you tweak it and you fix it. And it's about fast movement. It's about implementation, fast movement, so that you can reach that next level. Lawyers, that is very counterintuitive to what we're taught in law school, which is Go slow. Make sure it's right the first time. You don't want it to break. You want it to be right. So lawyers are told when we start law firms, do these three things, put policies in place, and the lawyer will say, well, I can't do that because of this, or that won't work because I have this problem. And I think a lot of lawyers will do better as entrepreneurs if they think to themselves, done is better than perfect, which is really hard for lawyers to hear because we push back against that. So when a coach, and I experience this myself, I do this a lot where my coaches, my business coaches will tell me, Kristen, you need to implement this thing. And I'll say, my first inclination is to bristle and to be like, but that's not applicable to me, or I'm special, or my firm is different than that, or that won't work for me. And I had to remind myself that my business coaches aren't telling me, do this thing exactly the way I'm telling you to do it. They're saying, do this thing in the way that works, implement it in the way that you can get it done as fast as you can get it done. So, for example, if we're talking about a policy, let's say you're talking about onboarding a client, and there's a particular way that you like to onboard clients. Well, you don't have to stop everything that you're doing to document this onboarding process perfectly before you onboard the next client. Just think to yourself, okay, I want to document how to onboard a client. The next client that I take in, I'm going to have a Zoom video recording myself doing it. I'm going to have Scribe pulled up. Use the tools that you have. Use an LLM, use a chat GPT, use Claude, use, whatever it is that you use, write it up, have it help you generate those materials, and then you save it to a folder. And then when you bring somebody into your firm, you use those as your training tools. That way you can do what you need to do and your firm doesn't come to a grinding halt.
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of the risk aversion in the legal profession is that fear of failure. And if we think to some other walks of life and discipline, like if somebody is learning how to ride a bike or how to ski, one of the first things they teach you is how to fall safely. Having gone through that journey and, grown to your practice to where you are, having mentors that pushed you in the right direction along the way, do you have maybe a specific example that's like a favorite example of where you fell short in some regard, but that became a really valuable lesson and showed you that, testing things, even if it doesn't work out in the moment, is still to the benefit of your overall growth?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest standout was hiring. So I always had a very particular idea about how I was going to hire somebody. And I had very particular ideas about, okay, I need this script to be exactly right, or I need this interview material to be exactly the way I needed it to be. And that would oftentimes lead to my detriment because I would be very unwilling to kind of defer or, detract from that, what I was doing. I'm like, this is the thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to do it just this way. And it would sometimes make me, because I was so new to hiring, right? I didn't start hiring full-time employees until 2020, and I started my law firm in 2014. So this is years of me not hiring people, not having. And so when I implemented this and I'm like, okay, I'm going to bring on full-time employees now, I was very scared to do it. And so because of that, I feel like I put blinders on and was like, this is how it's going to work for this position. This is how it's going to work for this position. This is how, and I wasn't willing to kind of see what people brought to the table. I was like, oh, they don't fit in this, like, what I have for myself here. I'm not going to consider it. And, one example is like in sales. So our mentors or my mentors, and I'm in a group with, hundreds of other small law firm owners in the country. And we have, professional CEO, CFO, COO training that, fractional, that they put into our business, and we meet with them. So one of the things that my coaches would always tell me is, listen to what people are saying. And just because, like, for example, the DISC analysis doesn't fit exactly, doesn't mean that they're bad. Doesn't mean that they're not a good fit. It just means that you need to be aware of what their DISC shows. Meanwhile, I'm going, their DISC isn't perfect. No, they're not even somebody I would consider, right? And so I think having, to your point, I think lawyers are very rigid in their thinking because the law is pretty rigid in terms of this is what the black letter law says. Yes, the black letter law is open to interpretation,
Mm-hmm.
but it's interpreted within a set of guidelines. And I think lawyers like to take that rigidity into entrepreneurship and say, okay, I have this set things. It makes us feel very comfortable. And comfortable is safety, but comfortable also means you're not growing. It also means you're not improving. And so I think that is something that I really had to work on. And I've gotten better at it because I will say I told you about that failure hire that I had in 2023, and it took me almost a year before I was even willing to entertain the idea of adding another attorney into the firm because I was like, it failed so miserably. Clearly, it wasn't meant to be. Clearly, I shouldn't have done this. Clearly, that was a bad idea. Instead of saying, okay, that wasn't the right fit, let's retweak, repost, and try again. I may have found somebody even better had I been willing to do that. But instead, I got so afraid, I pulled back on the whole thing. And then my firm didn't grow at all in 2024.
Right. Yeah. Just like you said earlier, that notion that my situation is unique happens to a lot of businesses that we talk to, for example, where I think the difference between novices and experts is that novices often think in binary terms.
Yes.
This works or it doesn't. Whereas somebody with expertise or just more experience in a certain area, they see how well does it work for me? How can we, even if it doesn't, fit the criteria, and like you said, when you have blinders on, if it doesn't fit that profile exactly, how can we make this work? How can we find the right role for that person that might not fit this job description, but would be a exceptional addition to the firm? One of the things about the hiring that you mentioned to me when we were talking earlier is your tolerance for difficulty and how you address that in your team members. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so that also speaks to what we were kind of just talking about. I have grown a lot as an employer as well. I take very seriously the notion of hire slow, fire fast. I take it very seriously because if, like I said, my team is not large. I don't have 100 employees. I have like 7. So it's not, it's not but we do high level work and we do volume. And so for that reason, everyone has a job and you can't hide behind it because there's not a lot of redundancy. And so I don't take incompetence lightly. I don't take the unwillingness to grow and learn in each role. I don't take that lightly either. And so when I have staff, I've gone through staff before, and when I see that turnover, I used to say, well, that's because they didn't do what I needed them to do. They weren't meeting their KPIs. I think that's also important, setting key performance indicators for your staff so that they know how to be successful. Otherwise, they're always going to wonder, am I doing well? Am I not? How am I doing? But one of the ways that I had to grow as a business owner and as an employer is to start looking at myself when that didn't work out, right? When an employee leaves or is terminated or quits or whatever happens, if that employee is no longer employed by you, it's important to do a diagnostic because yes, they may have failed. There may have been some incompetence, but also did you give them the tools that they needed to succeed in the first place? And if you're not willing to look at yourself and ask those hard questions, especially if you see a lot of high turnover in a role. And that's what I was seeing. In one particular role, there was a lot of turnover in that role. And I had to look at myself and say, well, wait a second. Yes, I could have been hiring bad fits for that role, for all of those people. But what was I expecting of them that maybe I wasn't communicating well enough? What training was I not willing to give to them? Or what training did I not give to them? Or what training was missing from the team that was giving it to them? And that's a lot harder to do because it's easy to say they messed up. It's harder to say, and how did I contribute to them messing up? And I think that separates a leader from a boss. And that's something that as I've had to completely carry with me and really take seriously in every aspect, right? Because I'm a very direct person. I don't beat around the bush. I tell you exactly what I need. And as a woman in the industry, it's not always received well. It's not always, oh, Kristen's the nicest person in the world. I can be perceived as a bitch because I know exactly what I want and I know exactly how I want it done. but I also need to be willing to say, okay, I thought I explained, how did I explain this to you in a way that didn't understand, especially when a mistake is made. Hey, what happened here? Instead of why did you do that? It's, hey, was this not clear? This was what I had assigned to you. I thought that was clear. Could you let me know how I could do better next time? And that sort of approach always performs better with staff. And it also helps weed out the people who really do give a shit and who really do care and want to grow in their roles from the people who are, if they approach that, if your employees approaches, hey, what happened here? How did I not communicate well? If they approach that defensively, that's a better indicator that they may not be a right fit than somebody who goes, oh, hey, well, I thought that you said this, but I didn't really understand that. And then I have to look at, okay, well, were those instructions not written well? How do I need to change my communication? Because everyone communicates different.
Certainly. And in your experience so far, like you said, in the first couple of years of your firm, you didn't hire full time, and then you started hiring and went through the experience of learning to communicate effectively. Have you seen somebody who did not start well initially succeed later? Or is it quite early on? And this is why the mentality of, how fast you both hire and fire as well. If somebody is a superstar, you will be able to tell relatively quickly, and that it's very rare that somebody lags behind and then they do better. What's your take on that?
If you had asked me 5 years ago, I would say, a superstar when you see them, and people, if they're not performing well in their role, then they're probably not a superstar. I thought in very binary terms in that regard, but that my mind changed a few years ago when I've run into several employees who I put into a particular role and they performed part of their role well, and then the other part they didn't. So for example, we're very fast moving. We're a very fast moving firm, and we've got a lot of things going at a time. Emails are coming in, appointments are needing to be made, and sometimes people don't do well. Some people's brains don't work well with constantly changing tasks. Some people, like me with ADHD, handle it very well. Other people do not. But that doesn't mean that their work is not valuable. It doesn't mean that what they are doing over here isn't maybe a full-time job. And that's why I also really, really, really think quarterly meetings with your employees, especially if you have a smaller team, it's not always feasible for 100 team people, but at least twice a year, even with larger teams, I think twice a year is important. But I meet with every single employee individually on a quarterly basis to go over their KPIs. And what I have them do in advance is I have them fill out a worksheet that tells me how they break their time down daily, monthly, and weekly, because there are probably things that those employees are doing that I'm not even seeing, but I'm getting the benefit of. And those things, like, for example, our intake staff right now, we're going through an entire revamp process on our intake procedure, because I realized that all of our follow-up is being done primarily manually. We want that personal touch, but it's also not cost effective, and it's not good for the staff who need to do other things to be constantly sending out emails to people who probably are never going to rebook their call anyway. So there are ways that we can leverage technology to help us with that. But I would never know that if I didn't have the data and the information that my employees are giving to me. So it's important that as a CEO and as somebody who is more than just the lawyer doing the legal work, but is managing the operations of the firm, it's very important to hear your employees tell you, because otherwise you're going to burn them out. Certainly. So yeah, I've moved several people around, and I've actually found that some employees were doing a full-time job really well over here, and they were dropping the ball on all of the other things that I thought were important, because that was what my life was revolving around. And so not a business has multiple levers and parts. Even though, yes, I am the one, I'm the owner, what my life is revolving around as a professional isn't necessarily what the firm's life is revolving around as its own entity. And I think that was something I had to learn and be willing to hear. A lot of people don't want to hear it. It's like figure it out, do what I tell you to do. And it's like, no, we got to make sure we're seeing progress. We can't see progress on projects if I'm constantly being the one who is, you know, going after every shiny, sparkly new object and then changing the direction of my team.
Yeah, certainly. And I think the tendency of modern workforce is to have that flexibility to find something that suits them, for their preferences. And like you said, somebody is good under pressure. Somebody needs to do their best work when they have time to think. And it's just different skill sets. Do you think that boutique law firms such as yours actually have an advantage in the current market because of that, since the traditional big law probably won't have that flexibility to look at every level what is suitable skill set for the people they have to create that environment when everybody is able to shine if they are a superstar but just need the extra push.
Absolutely. I think I will say this, and because I work with a lot of big law firms as well. We're outside counsel to a lot of companies that have in house counsel that are looking to shift. We work in conjunction with large firms. So there is always a time and a place for a big law firm. I don't think that boutique firms will ever supplant or get rid of the need for certain big law needs, big litigation, big, class action lawsuits, big infrastructure is needed for big legal projects. It's just the way of it, especially for like M&A transactions, right? If they're going at 6 a.m., they need the 25 associates on those so that some can get some sleep. And the responsiveness is just different. Whereas with a smaller firm, yes, we can be equally responsive, but I also have to balance my team's mental health, my team's ability to rest and recharge. And we don't have such a large, deep bench that some of these bigger firms have. So I don't want to ever say that big law is useless, but I do think in terms of advantages, smaller boutique law firms do have advantages in terms of being nimble and being able to change direction on strategy a lot faster, especially if things have already been started. Right. So if you're working on a big project over in a big firm and you're working in multiple different departments, you're like, well, actually, wait a second. I want to change this piece of it. Well, now the IP department has to talk to the business department, and we don't always see that. I've noticed that some of the portfolios that we have taken over from big firms, there are a lot of gaps in what the protection looks like, specifically because companies will go to big firms because they've got multiple departments. And so, in theory, it's a lot easier for them to say, well, we'll just put all of our legal work with this large law firm because they can do everything for us. But when those departments don't talk to each other, you start to, and the IP department's going, okay, we're just going to file all of these trademarks, or okay, we're just going to send all of these cease and desist letters without actually understanding what the business goal of that company is, or without understanding what the revenue generating strategy is for that portfolio. It winds up looking sort of haphazardly put together and done. And I think in a smaller boutique practice where like ours, for example, where we have a lot of business background as well, we can see things from a higher level, from like a 30,000 foot perspective, because we don't have 20,000 of us, we've got 7. So each one of us can start to see the holes and we can plug them and fill them a lot faster at a much more attractive cost. And I think that is what businesses are looking for now. Businesses are trying to streamline, businesses are trying to cut costs. That is no secret. And I think from that perspective, we have a much larger advantage than some of the larger firms.
That's interesting. And one aspect of that I also want to ask you about is that the lost art of saying, I don't know. Because my assumption would be that a lot of big law firms, they need to project certainty. And like you said, when they have a big team and they're doing all the work for the clients, they can't stop and say, we don't know this, we need to figure out. There is some degree of momentum of saying, like, this is what we are doing. And I think because of that, they're potentially missing some curiosity that could actually give better results to their clients as well. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, I think the reason that is because bigger firms get paid massive rates. I mean, we're talking $1,500 an hour plus attorneys. And so when you go to that type of firm, you expect them to know. And because why else would I be paying you that amount of money? And I think from a consumer standpoint, like from a client standpoint, that's not necessarily the right attitude to have. I think clients and consumers of legal services need to understand that the law is very much an it depends type of scenario. So the best answers are often the ones that have a little bit of gray. My goal as an attorney is to point out the risk. We're very much risk managers, right? Our job is to manage risk of all type, of all legal type. And so when we have a client that says, hey, just tell me what to do here, I'm usually a little befuddled by that request because it's like, well, what's your goal? What do you want? What do you know, if you, and what's your budget too, right? A lot of times we get clients that come to us that say, I want this outcome. And I'm like, great, it will cost this much money to have this outcome. And they go, well, I don't want to spend that much money. I want this outcome and I want to spend this much money. And it's a very difficult conversation to have because often the outcomes that they want are not within the budget that they can provide. And it always sort of breaks my heart a little bit that that is how for-profit law works. But unfortunately, that is how for-profit law works. It is very much who can afford what outcome. And that is, I think, a challenge for a lot of clients where they want what they want, but they don't necessarily, want to pay for it. And I think that also bleeds into being able to tell a client, I don't know, because you don't want to be seen as, well, I thought you told me. And I've lost a client, just one, but I've lost a client because they didn't feel that I was being forceful enough in giving my opinion. Like, well, you don't seem like you know. Well, that's because you're in a very odd predicament, right? This could happen depending on what you choose, how much you want to spend. And so I'm never going to give a client, this is what you should do, unless they tell me specifically, I want this for my budget. I have this, right? So unless I know the outcome that they want very, very clearly, and I know that that is what they want to happen, I am very reticent to tell somebody this is what you should do, because ultimately a business decision, most legal decisions come down to business decisions, not strictly legal decisions. Right. And oftentimes when I tell a client, this is what you should do, it's always met with, well, I don't think I can afford that, so I don't want to do it. So I'm like, okay, well, you asked me what you think I should do, and I told you what you should do, and now you don't want to do it. So I always prefer to give them, what I will do though, is I tend to narrow it down to two options. This is what you should do if cost were no issue. And this is what you should do if cost is an issue. So I always like to give people two options, because oftentimes one option cuts off other options. So it's very hard for you to say, all I care about is how cheaply I can get this done. And we're like, great. And then we move forward with that in mind. And then they're like, well, wait a second. Why did you say this? Why did you give up that? Why didn't you push back on this? And we're like, because you said to do it as cheaply as possible. Well, yeah, but I didn't mean that. It's fine, actually. Go back and change the strategy now. And so I think it's really important that no matter what you do with a client, you always talk to them and you revisit what their goals are. This is what we had talked about as being your goal before. Is that still the case? Because now things have changed a little bit. And that way you can sort of reorient them and they feel more comfortable that way. And they don't feel like they're being told, I don't know. They feel like they're being told, these are your options. Even though that's really what you're doing. You're telling them, I don't know. You're telling them this, but you're doing it in a way that feels better. And so I think language is important, but I do think I don't know is incredibly important. It is a complete sentence. And I think internally, I need my team to be able to tell me that, so that way I can help direct them.
I think it's definitely a superpower. And a lot of people, when they actually have the same information and they're on the same page, they quite often come to the same conclusions. So if there is a disagreement, or if there is a gap in expectations with the client, or expectations with an employee, it's usually that there is I don't know somewhere that just needs to be resolved. We do something similar to what you described, which is 1-3-1 framework for us. So whenever there is a problem, I usually want my team to say, this is the one problem, those are the 3 alternative solutions, this is our one recommendation to proceed. That way everybody has the information, we can make the decision together and move forward.
Yep. So I guess mine would be 1-2-1 then.
1-1. Leaner. I like it.
Well, 3 is too many options for people for the most part, because then they'll be like, well, what do you think? Right? The clients always want to know what the lawyers think. they don't really want to make a decision. They would rather their lawyer make the decision for them so that they can say, well, my lawyer told me to do that.
Certainly that might come up. I think a function also of being in a good position to tell your clients, this is my recommendation, this is what I know, this is what I don't know, is actually having good number of clients to work with. And a lot of lawyers, a lot of smaller firms, if they are dependent only on referrals, they don't really have the freedom to choose the clients. They almost feel like they need to take any client on. And because of that, they might not be in the best position possible to say, no, this is a bad fit, this is my recommendation. If this is the outcome you want, but you don't have a budget for it, it's unlikely this will happen. What was your maybe a specific point when you were growing and you were eager to take on work, but you made the decision that this is what I'm looking for in ideal client, and if the client doesn't meet those standards, it's better not to take that relationship at all?
Well, so I very much started out I was a general civil litigator back at my last law firm. I had a background in intellectual property, but my last law firm didn't have a need for an intellectual property attorney. They needed somebody who could go to court. That's what they needed. And so I was willing to fill that need because I graduated at the height of the at the recession. So, I mean, I was like, just give me a job, any job. I'll take a job as a lawyer. I'm licensed now. Please hire me. And I also didn't go to a top tier law school, so the job offers weren't flowing in for me. And so when I started my firm, I was very much a door lawyer. Anything that walked through the door, I could pretty much do it because I litigated every kind of case you could think of: real property, business disputes. I did some intellectual property disputes that I helped bring into the firm at the time. So, that was kind of the same mentality that I brought with me into my law firm when I started. And I realized very quickly that number one, it wouldn't serve me well, because how do you outsource that work to other employees? It's very hard to find somebody who's good at everything. And even though I had a very generalized background and I was pretty good at pretty much every type of law that I was taking on, it was all civil. I did no criminal or family or anything like that. I mean, family is civil, but I didn't do family law and I didn't do criminal law and I didn't do immigration law. It was like business disputes and, so from the business and the real estate and that kind of stuff. So for the most part, I had a really good understanding of that, but it's hard to find somebody who can do intellectual property and business and real estate and do them well. And so I thought to myself, well, I need to narrow down, because it's also hard to market to everybody. And it's also hard to get referrals from everybody, because lawyers get referrals from each other, and lawyers aren't going to want to give you a referral if you also do the main thing that they do in addition to this other little thing. And so I had to get very real with myself about what kind of law do I want to practice, and specifically what kind of law do I want to practice. And intellectual property, for me, I had a really great win on one of my trademark infringement cases back at my last law firm, and it had always been something I'd done all through law school. So I was like, this is what I'm going to focus on. I think though that small law firm owners have this mentality that if they're referral based, that they have to just take on everyone, that they don't have the ability to say no. And I think that is wrong. I think that you should know from the beginning what kinds of clients you want to work with. And for me, some of my criteria are: do they listen to my advice, like follow my advice? Do they pay on time? Are they kind to my staff? Do they scream and yell? Do they fly off the handle? And do they take feedback well? Those are some of the criteria. And it's not all of them, but we do have criteria and we frequently rank our clients A, B, C, D, and F. And if you are a D or an F client, we will fire you. I don't want to do work with people who scream at my staff, or who refuse to pay us, or who we tell they're doing something wrong and they don't want to fix it. I don't like to add that kind of risk into my practice. And so I choose to get rid of them. And is it money? And some of the clients, I got rid of a client that, they were doing $300 million a year plus, and it wasn't a good fit, and that's okay. But, I am still about 85% referral based, and there is no shortage of work. I think what people do badly in referral based businesses is they don't work the existing client base that they have. Right. Even if you have 5 clients and you're just getting started, even if I started my firm, by the way, with 0 clients, none, not a single client.
Mhm.
I got my first client because she was a famous blogger, and her blog had a trademark application pending with the USPTO. And I just told her how to fix it. I said, it's really easy. You can do it yourself. And she goes, how about you do it for me? I said, okay, sure. So I just took care of it for her really, really quick. It was like a disclaimer. It was super easy. And it went through, and she was so excited and so happy that she started singing my praises in all of these private Facebook blogger groups. And so everybody started hiring me at that time. And so I went from doing 0 clients to, I went from doing 0. I did about $250,000 in my first year of practice by myself. And that was, I mean, I had no clients. I started with 0, and I started in June too. So this was like 6 months, we built,
Right.
scaled past 6 figures pretty quickly. And it wasn't, and so I think that business owners get it in their heads that, like, well, I have to take these clients. No, you don't. You don't have to take them. And if you have clients already and you're not leveraging those clients to get more clients, you're doing something wrong. Gifting to your clients works amazingly well. Just to let them know, thank you so much for all of the business you've given me. You're an amazing client. We love you. We think you're great. Reaching out to them. Hey, I just wanted to ask, I really love working with you, and we have an opening in our business for some additional client work. We would love to meet more people like you. Do you have
Mhm.
anyone you can introduce me to? You're not asking for clients. You're asking to introduce you to people that are like you, people that are like this great client. And that hopefully will, evolve into something else. But that's what we were talking about, right? Giving a shit. Like, you have to care. You have to reach out to those people and say, hey, how's it going? How are things with you, without expecting something back in return, and your business will flourish.
And what I think smaller firms need to realize as well, that if they want to service their community, if they want to make a difference, they have to be active. They have to let people know about how they can help. If they see a case they can take on and help, they should actively pursue it. They shouldn't just be passive and rely on referrals, not work their network, because they doing disservice to the people they could be helping.
Yeah, and lawyers are nervous about that stuff, right? Because we've got state bar rules, especially here in the U.S. The bar, doesn't allow us to directly solicit people, but that doesn't mean you can't work your network to try to get an introduction. I know a lot of people love to hate on LinkedIn because it's like the Facebook for, millennial business people, but it is a great way to figure out who you're connected to figure out who might be willing to make an introduction for something that you can help with. And there's no rule against talking to somebody and saying, hey, you know me, I know you, I do good work. You know that person. Would you be willing to make an introduction for me? And you're already ahead of the game by doing that, by asking, by just making the ask, because so many people are afraid of asking that they just don't even do it. And then I tell my daughter this, the answer is always no unless you ask. It's always going to be a no unless you ask for what you want.
Absolutely. So from starting to 0 to generating all the clients that you have today, what's been your most memorable marketing lesson that you learned in your practice?
Oh gosh. Don't sign a 1-year SEO contract with somebody who promises that they can make big changes for you for thousands of dollars a month just for SEO. I think that for me, I don't have a background in online selling. I'm very much a people person. So my business has always grown with people. And also the types of clients we serve are relationship based. So, we're not serving our clients, institutions, are companies. So their general counsels aren't Googling trademark lawyer San Diego. They're going, okay, who do I know? Who can introduce me? Hey, does anybody know about this person? Right. So they're looking for direct referrals. They're not looking for internet searches, but I do want to have that capture there and that retargeting. So knowing what it is that you're looking for and knowing the target market is important. And that's why I think I failed with that marketing mistake that I made.
Mm-hmm.
I think I made that mistake because I was still very unsure about who our clients were, who our ideal client is, because there's that feeling in the back of your head like, but if I say just this one type of client, then everybody else is not going to find us. And so I really had a difficult, I mean, that was until like last year. So like,
Right.
it was very like, this is, decades in the making of me being willing to grow and change. And I think the more you are willing to examine yourself and your own shortcomings and your own unwillingness to change and grow, the faster you will grow.
Certainly. And yeah, no 1 year contracts. What's on the opposite side of that for you with where you are in the firm and with the way how you network and you talk to people? What does a great marketing partner look like for you, whether it is in-house hire or an external partner?
Like a great marketing partner who is willing to adjust and change their strategy depending on what it is, what outcomes we're looking for. So I like a partner who is proactive, somebody who comes to me and says, "Hey, Kristen, here's your report for this month. Here's what's working. Here's what's not. This is the change that we are suggesting that you make to this campaign or this thing. And here's why." So I like people who are proactive because I'm proactive. I'm proactive in what I'm good at. I expect the people that I hire, my vendors, to be proactive in the things that they're good at. And I also like them to be cost effective too, right? Like if I'm paying you thousands of dollars a month, I expect the same white glove service that I'm providing to my clients that are spending thousands of dollars a month.
Makes sense. Kristen, where can somebody who's interested about your work find you online?
I am everywhere online. Now, you can find me on my website, TrestleLaw.com, TRESTLELAW.com. I'm also on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So, and YouTube too. So, all on Trestle Law's accounts. So, it's very easy to find me online.
Top marks on that. Excellent. Kristen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.